Hello. Today I will be talking about the meat industry and the plethora of downstream health and nutritional effects it has on Americans. As Americans, the meat industry, comprised of poultry, beef, turkey, veal, lamb, pork, and more, is the largest segment of our agriculture. In this presentation, I'm going to analyze the shortcomings of this industry and how they affect every one of you. Yes, even the vegetarians and vegans. Companies like Tyson, Cargill, JBS, and more are some of the few responsible for feeding everyone. The meat industry contributes $894 billion to the U.S. economy and employs 5.9 million people. All of this seems great for stimulating the economy and providing work for Americans, but there is a price to be paid. 4 major corporations slaughter, process, and distribute 80% of all U.S. cattle. They are also producing 58.5% of the country's poultry. America eats 3 times more meat than any other country. The USDA and other government policies have a hand in creating a culture in which our diet focuses on meat as the bulk provider of certain vitamins and minerals. With mass production and demand on the meat industry in America, we are bound to see a decrease in quality impacting us all down the line. The problem is not just cattle and poultry, however. Since 1961, meat production has risen on a global scale from 71.36 million tons worldwide to 317.85 million tons in 2014. That is an increase of 445% in roughly 53 years. Unfortunately, concern for our health has taken a backseat to satiating our gluttonous consumption of meat. Meat provides several vitamins and minerals to our bodies, such as B12 and iron, necessary for circulation, red blood cell health, and immune system health. It is also a great source of magnesium, zinc, and riboflavin. Evolutionarily, cooked meat is partially responsible for Homo sapiens' increase in brain size. Although there are alternatives to finding these nutrients, I find meat the quickest, easiest, and tastiest. But the meat we are eating today is drastically different from the same meats we were eating years ago. From 1925, the average time for a chicken to reach market maturity has decreased from 112 days to just 48, while the size has gone from 2.5 pounds to 6.2 on average. So how exactly does the meat industry make a fatter chicken faster than ever before? Put simply, they have been pumping our animals full of additives and antibiotics to maximize growth. And while this poses ethical and moral questions, I will be focusing on how that directly affects you and I. Pumping animals full of antibiotics allows them to grow unnaturally fast, and in some cases prevents them from dying due to natural diseases. But when humans eat animals whose systems have digested and absorbed antibiotics, it has negative effects on us. Dioxins are also a chemical compound that accumulate in the fatty tissue found in meat of animals. For humans, dioxins can cause reproductive and developmental problems, damage the immune system, interfere with hormones, and even promote cancer. Naturally, red meats are high in saturated fats, which can increase cholesterol levels. The meat industry has increased the level of fat, cholesterol, and calories even further by feeding the animals corn and soy, which are cheaper alternatives to their natural diet. So unsurprisingly, eating red meats increases your low-density lipoprotein, also known as LDL or bad cholesterol, which increases your risk of heart disease. Red meats also introduce nitrates into your body, which are also bad for your cardiovascular health. On this slide, I have included pictures so we can visualize what's going on. The first image is the vitamin B12, which can be found in eggs, meat, milk, oysters, and poultry. B12 deficiencies are characterized by tingling, weakness, and numbness, all symptoms of anemia or nervous system injury in the future. The middle is the compound riboflavin. It can be found in grains, plants, and dairy products. It is crucial for breaking down food components, absorbing other nutrients, and maintaining tissues. The third image to the far right is a magnesium chart, which lists benefits of magnesium, such as lower risk of diabetes, improved mood, proper heart function, reducing asthma attacks, and so much more. Magnesium is plentiful in meat, but it can also be supplemented with foods such as potatoes, spinach, brown rice, and avocado. On to bacteria and saturated fats. The blue chart to the left shows common sources of how antibiotics can be introduced into our system directly and indirectly. Hospitals, water pollution, runoff into our crops, and eating meats are big ones. The danger is because bacteria are highly adaptive and have short reproductive cycles. With constant exposure, it would only take a few life cycles for bacteria to become resistant to a certain antibiotic, rendering it useless. This puts us at risk because modern medicine cannot adapt as quickly as these bacteria. Saturated fats were discussed in class, so I will be brief. They lack a double bond in the fatty acid chain and are solid at room temperature. In short, these fats can be saturated with hydrogen molecules, posing loads of cardiovascular complications and diseases. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of what meat does to your body. It is up to you to weigh the pros and cons depending on your body, but think about how easily all the vitamins and minerals can be supplemented by plants and grains, whereas the cons cannot be as easily justified. The biology of meat in our bodies has been heavily studied, but the meat industry is doing much more than feeding us meats. They are reshaping our environment. Compared to the vegetable side of agriculture, meat agriculture is extremely inefficient. Starting with water usage, vegetables use about 322 liters per kilogram produced, whereas beef uses 15,415 liters per kilogram produced. In addition to using approximately 31% of all fresh water, nitrate runoff found in animal waste, pesticides, fertilizers, pathogens, and toxic chemicals have created entire dead zones, which are areas completely devoid of aquatic life due to the toxicity of water. The meat industry also requires massive amounts of land. Although animals are tightly packed in unsuitable living conditions, almost 80% of all agricultural land is dedicated to producing the feed for animals. If all of those grains being used to feed animals were given directly to people, you could easily feed about 800 million people instead. As livestock consumes 5 times as many grains in a year than is consumed by the United States population. As if all of this wasn't bad enough, animals that produce red meat create up to 40 times more greenhouse gas emissions as grains and vegetables do. The process of spreading pesticides and nitrogen-based fertilizers generates something called nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas that is 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And 1/5 of all the methane, another hazardous greenhouse gas, is produced by cows. The sheer overpopulation and misuse of farmlands by these major corporations to mass produce is quickly killing our environment, taking all of our fresh water and poisoning us. To make matters worse, there is a racial, socioeconomic, and location-based inequality in which lower-income, colored, and rural populations are more directly affected by these social and health impacts of environmental contamination of these corporations. And although long-term health effects have yet to be pointed out, they are immediately unable to relocate to safer areas with drinking water and clean air. The idea of cultural eutrophy is an accelerated addition to water from runoff of nitrates. The effects of cultural eutrophy is less oxygen in the water, impenetrable surfaces of water which kill plants living under the surface, and toxic species making the water unusable. Factories littered along the Mississippi have made it a prime example of this and has created dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico. We can also find dead zones along the Oregon and Washington state coasts, where lots of seafood is fished from. The Gulf of Mexico as a dead zone has broken into the news circuit, and yet it is another example of the downstream effects of the meat industry has. It is truly taking over many aspects of our lives, and if we continue to demand meat on such an unprecedented rate, we will run out of fresh water and kill many species dwelling along the coast. In conclusion, I have laid out the facts for you, but I cannot tell you how to eat. You are now aware that Americans are producing and eating 3 times as much meat as any other country. We receive more than enough protein from these meats, but are still suffering from cardiovascular disease, high cholesterol, and being introduced to stronger bacteria than ever. We are poisoning our environment with greenhouse gases, creating dead zones, monocrops, and putting low-income communities in harm's way. For what? More and more meat. So what is the solution? I believe that we can decrease all of the effects aforementioned by decreasing our meat intake as little as 10%. These companies can continue producing the way that they have been, manipulating policy and justifying themselves in the interest of feeding the exponentially growing population, but by 2050, there will be even less land, less fresh water, stronger bacteria, and more population than ever. With their projected water, energy, and land usage, there's no likelihood of any of these companies obtaining the resources they annually use because they will be depleted. By decreasing our meat consumption from our average 222.2 pounds per year to just 200 pounds per year, we will still see a reversal of all of these terrible health effects. Thank you so much for listening to my Fed Talk.